This is the lid I made yesterday. This is the simpler lid option I showed you. And as you can see, it is a good fit right now for our teapot. I'm going to put the body aside and show you how to finish this. So just so you can see what it looked like from above, this is basically just a small upside down shallow bowl. And when I'm trimming this, just like always, I have to start by centering it, but really this is going to be different than trimming a bowl if you've done that, because I'm not making a foot ring. All I'm trying to do is get this extra clay off so that I can go in and add a knob and get rid of all my extra weight. So I'm centering this. I think that's there. I'm going to lock it down with 3 little lugs of clay. I'm going to come in and just start evening this off with a big flat tool, big flat trimming tool. And now come in at an angle and start getting rid of that extra clay. So just like when I trim a bowl, up front, before I put this on the wheel, I really examined how much clay I had on there. And this is a nice firm leather hard, so my trimmings are just flying right off. If you ever try trim in your trimming stick, it's a sign that your clay is not dry enough. So I'm going to switch to a smaller tool using this shape. And I switched just because this is a pretty small piece. And that big tool was starting to get on the road. Now there are some people who throw this style lid with a whole lot of extra clay, and then they'll actually leave part of that clay in the middle and trim down around it to create a knob. But what I'm going to show you today is my favorite way of trimming all your extra clay off and then actually attaching some clay and throwing a quick knob. Okay, I think that's most of my clay that I need to remove. I think we're pretty much even. I'm going to squish down my little lugs holding on the clay a little bit more just so I can get down low enough to make that transition even. Another reason I think I've taken enough off is because the curve on the outside of my lid is now resembling the same slope and type of curve that I observed on the inside of this. So I'm going to go ahead and just create a little raised spot right there, and then add some clay to it. So this is soft clay that is straight out of the bag that I wedged. I'm going to pat it against the bat to create a flattened bottom, and then I'm just dabbing the tiniest bit of water on here, and I'm scoring it. So just like all connections, I want to be able to slip and score this. But the reason I'm not adding a ton of slip is because this can't get too gooey, or else this little ball is not going to stick well when I start spinning. So I'm creating just a little bit of slip by adding just water on there and then scoring. And now I have my ball of clay, which I am just gently pushing down with my thumb and my fingers, trying to make sure this seals all the way around. That's feeling pretty good. And now I'm going to center this. So when I work with this tiny ball of clay on top, I don't want to get more water on this lid than possible because I don't want it to get wet and start to lose its structure. So whenever I add water, I'm going to try to just add it to this little ball of clay on top. But I also have a sponge handy, so if I do accidentally drip on the main part of my lid, I can come in and dry it off. So I'm doing like a little tiny version of coning on this by just taking my fingers around the clay and gently sliding up. And one thing I found is it's almost impossible to get the very bottom of this centered where it attaches to the lid, just because that part tends to start to stiffen up a little faster as it starts making contact with the drier clay. But that's okay. I'm mostly worried about from here up being centered, because I can always go in with the trimming tool and just nick any little extra wiggle off the bottom. So now that this is pulled up, I'm going to push the clay down, and I'm doing this the same way I would when throwing a pot. The only difference is my thumb on my left hand is filling in for that back part of my left palm. My right hand, instead of having the whole side of my palm across, I'm just using the top of my pointer finger. Just a little more water there. Okay. I think we are pretty well centered. And now I get to shape my knob. So I'm going to use the back of my thumbnail to push in the base a little bit. And I've got a little water down on my lid, which I'm going to dry. And then I'm going to use my fingers on the top just to pull the top up a little bit into point, because I really like that shape. I'm really not getting this wetter than I need to. It's looking good. Go back in with my thumb, lift that up a little bit. And the only real functionality considerations you need to consider for a knob, that you do need a part that your fingers can really lock onto. I'm not a fan of a super rounded, like orb-shaped knob, just because it's a little hard to hang on to something that's so rounded. But if you have something that has a little bit of a ridge and an undercut part, you can really get a grip on that with your fingers. So right now I'm thinking you get your fingers underneath right there to pick it up. That makes this top part mostly decorative, but I'm going to think about how it compares to the shape of my body of the teapot. And see if I can make these two go together well. I'm liking that a lot. I think I'm going to use the back of my fingernail to go and just make a little groove. I like using the back of my fingernails in place of ribs. And I don't have long fingernails. You know, I'm a potter. I have to keep them pretty short, but still, that little bit I have is a nice way to go in and create just a little shaping when a rib is too big to fit. I like that top to be just a little more pointed. There we go. Now I realize that what I just showed you breaks one of the rules that many of us are taught about pottery, which is that whenever you join clay to clay, you want both sides of the attachment to be more or less the same wet or dryness. So you were probably taught when you make handles for a mug that you always want the handles and the mug to be leather hard when you attach them. Otherwise, you risk one side shrinking a little bit more than the other one and pulling apart. So I know this breaks that rule, but it's going to be okay. By the time you're ready for teapots, you're ready to learn that once in a while you can break rules. I still only attach handles that are leather hard to leather hard mugs, but for something like this, it will work as long as you then take this off the wheel and keep it under plastic overnight so that both sides have time to acclimate. I'm also going to go in now. I have that shape basically the way I want it. Just going to take one of my trimming tools now and just scrape up a little bit of that unevenness at the bottom. You'll see this is a little tricky because the clay wants to stick. It doesn't want to fly off because it's wet, but you can do it. You just have to kind of be slow and steady and gently scrape off any little globs that are sticking. I clean my tool frequently and that usually helps. There we go. Okay, so I think the only other thing I'm going to do here is come in with a damp sponge and just gently soften some of those sharp edges I created down here. And that's it. I'm not going to pick this up by the knob, obviously, because that is still way too wet. I'm just going to pull off my extra bits of clay, which, there we go, are going to kind of stick. There. And just lift this up by the side. There you have it.